Okay, so this is really exciting. So for this is going to be our first week of our intermediate software engineering class. So what is this class about? What are we going to do? We're going to go into that a little bit later, but I want to start by doing intros. So this class was made possible by a lot of people doing a lot of work to contribute. So this is everybody who helped put this course together. Some of these people you're going to see later as instructors. Some of these people contribute to what you see in our assignments or in-class exercises, but this is everybody involved. I don't know who's here and who's not here. So I guess I'll just start. So my name is Karen, for those people that don't know yet. So my name is Karen, and I'm one of the instructors for this course. A little bit about me. So I'm currently in San Francisco, so that's San Francisco Bay Area. I'm on Pacific Standard Time. I'm mostly an Android engineer. So right now I'm working at Google. I mostly write documentations and sample apps for Android developers to kind of teach them what the best practices are for developing Android apps and what the newest and greatest technologies for Android is. Before that, I worked at a lot of startups. And so if you have questions about what it's like to work at a startup versus a big company, or you're curious about what it was like getting into Google, feel free to ping me. I'm always on Slack. So for those people who, I think some people mentioned this earlier, but we do have a Slack channel, and that's where most of our communication is going to happen. So if you don't know what I'm talking about, definitely ask me or email me later. Is any of the other instructors here right now that wants to introduce themselves? Let's see.
Dan's here.
Hey, Dan.
Hey, so briefly about myself. Currently a senior software engineer here in San Francisco as well. I recently, about a couple months ago, joined the creators team as a senior software engineer at Pinterest. Before that, worked at Netflix in the South Bay, and prior to that, did a succession of startup and government contractor, and also ran my own small business. So happy to be here.
Cool. So Dan, yeah, you'll probably see a lot of Dan. Dan's also one of the instructors for this course, and he also helped put together a lot of the materials for this course. I see Alex here. Sorry, I don't have your picture on here, Alex, but if you want to introduce yourself.
Yeah, sure. So I'm not really an instructor, but I am, I guess, the quality assurance. So I kind of help with the development of the course portal and the hacker ranks. Hopefully everything goes smoothly there. And if not, I guess you can blame me. But I'm currently a student at UT Austin, going into my senior year next year. So last summer I worked at Uber, Internet Uber, while helping out with another one of the CodePath courses, the advanced interviewing prep. This summer I'm going to be working at a quantitative hedge fund in New York, and I'll be helping out with this course. So yeah, feel free to ping me about anything as well. I'll be on Slack.
Yeah, Alex is awesome, and he's really good at interviews, and he knows the process. He's currently in college, so he just went through the process. So he's probably the most familiar out of all the instructors here. If you have questions about that, I'm sure Alex would be more than happy to answer. I don't know if any other instructors are here right now. See, I don't know, Nathan and Tim, you want to introduce yourself? Oh, hey.
Yeah, I'll introduce myself since I think I'm giving a couple guest lectures for the pilot crowd. So hi, everyone. I'm Tim. I'm one of the CodePath co-founders. Pretty similar background to the others. I'm an engineer in the Bay Area for the past 15 years or so. So I did 5 years as a kind of an engineer, then I did 5 years as kind of a startup founder, and now I've done 5 years as a nonprofit founder. So I've kind of run the gamut of a couple different things, and excited to kind of help you all prep for this interview process.
I'll introduce myself too. Can everyone hear me? Sometimes my mic goes out. Good. Okay. I'm Nathan. I'm the other CodePath co-founder. So me and Tim started CodePath together many years ago now, born out of kind of our shared love for education. And for me, at least, somewhat born out of my own experience in college, which I'm happy to share with you all at a later time. But going through running a startup and going through a CS program at the same time, and seeing the massive disparity between the course content in school and the reality on the ground as a software engineer, both in the interview process as well as actually when you're in the nitty gritty of working on the job. And so we're all very passionate about education. That's why we're here. And I've been spending a lot of time thinking about we've all been thinking about a lot how to prepare students as effectively as possible for the practical reality of software engineering. And that's what this is really all about, this course, this company. Excited to have you all helping out testing this content as part of the pilot. And ping me on Slack anytime if you have questions or if you're looking for specific materials. I've been developing a lot of content for the Career Center as well. So you'll see me around, but nice to meet all of you.
Cool. Is there any other instructors online that would want to introduce themselves? I don't think anybody is on. But yeah, we do have the site of all the instructors. And if you look in the Slack channel, all of us are in the same Slack channel. So if you're interested in pinging a certain instructor or asking them a question, you can always look them up by name and ping them any questions you have. Okay, so moving on. So I wanted to get started by kind of talking about our goal for this class, right? So why are we all meeting once a week, maybe even twice a week for 2 months? Like, what are we trying to get out of this class? So I think the main thing that I want everybody to be able to get out of this class is be able to start going into phone screens with confidence. So these are technical phone screens. And something that I really struggled with when I was in college was every time I had a phone screen, I felt like I was very unprepared. And granted, I still feel like I'm unprepared a lot of times going into interviews. I feel like you can probably never be 100% prepared for interviews, but we want to be able to get everybody at least into a comfortable state where you think that you could be able to pass. So I'm kind of just like curious, how many people here have done a technical interview before on a phone screen or on site? How many people here? And you can answer questions in the chat on the site, so, and I could read them and everybody else can read them as well. So how many people here have actually gone through a technical phone screen? Cool. I mean, you could say yes, you could say no, you could type in yes, you could type in no, you could type in anything. Okay, great. So everybody has pretty familiar with the interview process already. How many people, when you start going to phone screen, when you're getting ready for phone screen, how many people feel like really, like, what's your confidence percentage when you go into a phone screen? 0. Really low. Okay, yeah. So for me, myself, when I first started, I didn't even know what a technical phone screen was, right? Like, I literally just went in, I was like, I could code on my laptop, I could produce code, I can make things run. Like, I don't have to study for anything, right? So I was like, the very first time I went in, I was like, I'm 100% confident I could pass this. And they gave me like a linked list question. I was like, I think it was like reverse linked list. And I was like, what in the world? I have no idea how to do that. I don't even know what that means. Like, why would you ever even reverse a linked list, right? So it was like kind of that moment of realizing that I know how to code, but I actually don't know how to do these technical phone screens at all. So this is what we kind of want to help you gain confidence in throughout this course. So the first thing that I kind of want to point out is that technical interviews are hard, right? There's really no getting around this. Like, if some people might just be like geniuses and they're like, these are easy peasy, I don't have to study. But for the other like 98% of us, technical interviews are definitely hard. It's not common. You usually don't go on a whiteboard to write code. You don't have a compiler. You don't have like autocomplete. Technical interviews are just hard in general, right? You're getting critiqued and you're getting judged every moment for the code that you're writing on a whiteboard. So these are just hard. I just want to point this out. This is not easy for anybody. But the good part about all these technical interviews is that we realize that most questions that you get posed at during a technical interview kind of follow the same pattern. So what we mean by that is sometimes you might see like a string question, and then there's only really 10 different variants of string questions. So if you know these string questions really well, and you kind of know like the different patterns and the different techniques that you can use to solve problems, things start getting a lot easier. So there is a way to crack these interviews. There is a way to crack solving these questions. It just takes a little bit of time. But the thing I really, really want to stress is key to acing how to do these interviews is just repeated practice. Like, there's really no getting around this. For a lot of people, it's going to be, you're going to have to do these problems multiple times. You might see a problem, you do it once, and you think you got it. But the key really is to keep doing it, keep practicing it, and keep getting more familiar with it. And then the other part of it is seeing different kinds of problems. So the more problems you see and the more times you see them, the more familiar you are going to get with these things. And this is really true for really most of us. And something that I struggled with when I first started interviewing was I thought, okay, yeah, I know what linked list is. I know how binary trees work. I could probably figure it out on the spot. Like, I don't really need to study. But that's really sadly not the case, right? For a lot of times, the more practice you get, the faster you're going to get at something, the more familiar you're going to get with these questions, and the better you're going to be able to produce during the interviews themselves. And another part of this is actually when you go into these interviews, like, you're going to get really nervous, right? But if you have a lot of practice and you kind of know what to expect, your nerves kind of go away, and that's when you can start performing a lot better during these interviews. So this is kind of what we're going to practice throughout this whole summer, how to be really good at these technical interviews. And really the end goal is to land an internship, right? So how many people here are actually working at an internship this summer? Yeah, answer in the chat. Is there anybody doing internships right now? Okay, so a lot of people are already doing internships. That's a great first step. So the key to getting a full-time offer is to have an internship while you're still in school. So a lot of people are already there. For those that aren't, we're going to really try to help you to get an internship. So we want to be able to set you up for success in these technical interviews and then help you land that final internship so that when you graduate, you have a full-time offer. So how are we going to work towards this goal that we have of getting really good at these technical interviews? So the first one is part of this class is lectures. So lectures like kind of what we're doing now. We're going to have lectures to kind of teach you concepts and walk you through different techniques. So this is kind of like, what are binary trees? And most people already know what binary trees are, but the part that we all struggle with is how do we go about solving different kinds of binary tree problems? What are the different patterns that different binary tree problems have? And as we look at more and more questions, we're going to start seeing like these patterns and start getting more familiar. So part of this class is the lectures, kind of like what we're doing now, to kind of enforce these concepts and walk through different techniques. So you might see like instructors walking through a certain problem, telling you what their mindset is when they see a problem the first time and how they go about solving it and how they go about checking the answer is correct. So that's the first part of it. Second part is the other half of the class is going to be a lot of in-class exercises. So this is the part where after the instructor gives a lecture, we're going to break out into little groups of 3 to 4. So right now we're in this very big room of like 30 people, but very soon we're going to start breaking out into smaller groups where we're going to do hands-on in-class exercises. So this is the part where we're going to give you like practice problems and you're going to work on certain techniques to get better at interviewing. And the third part is extra practice problems. So for some people, these lectures, going to lectures and doing in-class exercises, you might still feel a little uncomfortable with certain types of techniques and certain problems. So we provided extra practice problems for you and review material so that on your own time, you can have material to look over and extra practice problems to do in case you feel like you need a little more push to understand something better. And finally, the last thing is the weekly HackerRank assessment. So every week we're gonna have, I think it's due on Sunday night. So every week you wanna go and take a HackerRank assessment. And this is kind of a way to let yourself know, are you on track? Are you getting the materials? Are you getting the materials comfortably? So does anybody not know what HackerRank is? I'm not sure. I actually didn't know what HackerRank was before this class. So HackerRank is basically like this, I don't really know how to describe it. It's kind of like a testing site where you get multiple choice questions and coding problems. And so we're going to give you multiple choice questions and open free response coding questions where you can go in and kind of like assess yourself on how you're doing in the class. So this is a way for you to keep track, keep yourself up to date. And lastly, I think the best part of CodePath classes is the instructors, the mentors, and the fellow classmates here. So part of this class is the community that we build for you, right? So this is very different than studying for interviews yourself, because you can say, I'm going to set 2 hours every week and go on LeetCode and solve problems by myself. But this class is different in the sense that we have a community for you. So this is like all of us going into this together. So if you have questions about how do I go about solving this problem, or how do I go about finding an internship, this is what everybody is here for you. Does that make sense? So that's kind of the general outline of what we're trying to accomplish in this class and how we're going to accomplish that. So this is the outline of the topics that we think are most important in this class. So first, this week, we're just kind of like going to get familiar with this class. What are we going to do? Get familiar with this Zoom virtual classroom. And then we're going to jump into Big O and hash tables. So that's kind of like doing analysis on the algorithms that you write. Then we're going to linked list, and we're going to leave a week for review so you can kind of catch your breath. And then we're going to go into stacks and queues, strings and arrays. And then finally, we're going to go into binary trees before we do a final review. So these are the topics that we found to be most common in technical interviews. And we think that if you're able to master all of these topics, you should be really comfortable going into phone screens. All right, time for questions. So does anybody have questions on anything I just said, comments?
You're not gonna go over something like dynamic programming, or because I heard the concept also appears on interview questions. I'm just curious.
Yeah, that's a good question. So the question was whether we're going to go over dynamic programming. And so I think I forgot to mention this, but this is only part 2 of our 3-part interview prep course. And so in this second class, we're not going to go into dynamic programming. So what we found when we looked at questions that big companies and small companies asked was that dynamic programming isn't quite as common as maybe going through like binary trees or linked lists. So dynamic programming definitely comes up, but it's usually in companies more like Google when you're on site. So it does come up, but it doesn't come up as often. If that makes sense. But we do have a class in the next class after this series, we do go over dynamic programming.
So when does the class start? If you know the answer.
Oh yeah, so that class actually takes place at the same time. So we have these 2 classes taking place at the same time. This is the precursor to the second class.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if I finish this class, or I have to wait for like to this time of next year, or like okay.
Yeah, so these are summer classes, and so the idea is that you would take one after another. So yeah, the next summer I think is when you can sign up for the next class.
Okay.
I'm going to read some of the questions from the chat and answer those. Let's see. So do we have to agree on one programming language during group practice? So yeah, that's a good question, because some people are comfortable in Java, some people are comfortable in Python. It would be ideal. So for a lot of the in-class exercises, there's going to be one main person driving for each question. So for the person that's doing the driving, so the person like mostly writing out the code for that question, I think it would be best to let that person decide, like, hey, we're going to do this problem in Java. And hopefully code is kind of all readable. Once you know one language, it's kind of readable in another language. So yeah, we do have to decide during that thing for one person to say, okay, I'm going to start writing this one in Java. But the next time that someone is doing a new problem, they say, hey, I'm going to do this problem in Python. So what level of company is this prep course preparing us for? Well, we really want to prepare you for all levels of company. I think the way to think about this is we want to set you up for success for all companies, but maybe in this first class, we're not 100% confident that you could maybe go to Google and pass an on-site for Google. But we do want to set you up for that. And our next class, the SC 103 class, the course after this, is when we think we want to be able to provide you all the information to be able to set you up for success for all types of companies. If that makes sense. Does anybody else have any other questions? There's plenty of time for questions, and if you have questions later, you could always ask us on Slack as well. Okay, so kind of going into the expectations for this class and what we think you should be able to do in order to succeed. So the first thing is just attend these weekly sessions. So every Tuesday, we have classes at 6 p.m. We do have optional Saturday classes. So the Saturday classes are going to be a little bit random in the sense that not all Saturdays are going to have class. So every instructor is in charge of leading for a weekly thing. So if the instructor thinks that for that week they want to hold a Saturday session, there will be a Saturday session. So how it's working now is if you have a calendar invite for a specific Saturday, that means we are going to have a session that Saturday at 10 a.m. PST, but we don't have it for all Saturdays. And these Saturday sessions are optional. The only ones you're required to attend are going to be the Tuesday ones. The second thing you want to be able to do is complete our weekly HackerRank test. So this is a definitely must. So you have to do this HackerRank test. These are not optional at all. Optional is practice problems. But this weekly HackerRank test is definitely required. So these are linked in the course portal. And every week you go into the assignments tab for a course portal, you click on the HackerRank test and you take that test. And then these are the optional resources I kind of mentioned earlier. So we do provide you with extra reading and practice problems. Right before you take the HackerRank test, you might feel more comfortable if you do some practice problems and read up on the topics that we discussed for that week beforehand. So these are optional. You don't have to submit anything. We're not going to check for whether you did this or not. So the course portal is going to be the most important thing for the summer. So hopefully everybody knows about this course portal. Does anybody not know what I'm talking about when I say course portal? So that's the link for our course portal, and you definitely want to bookmark it now because we're going to be going on it. First of all, we're going to be going on it every time we have a weekly Tuesday session, but also all the resources and all the assignments and this lecture is going to be posted into the course portal as well. So you want to definitely bookmark this course portal. Does anybody not know what I'm talking about when I say course portal? Okay, so because this is very important. This is where all our information is going to be. So kind of just giving you an overview of how the course portal works. So every week, On the left side, you can see we have like weeks 1 through 12 because this course is 12 weeks. And every week you probably want to start on the overview tab. So this is just kind of getting an idea of, hey, what are we going to do this week? What are the different topics we're going to go over? What are the important things you need to know for this week? For example, this week, you do have a hacker rank assessment, so that you need to take that. And then there's these other 2 tabs, which is the session tabs. So these session tabs are important because this is where I'll be posting lecture slides. So the lecture slides that I'm going over right now, this is where you can find the lecture slides in the session tabs. But also the most important thing about the session tabs is that this is the information. This is the part where you can find all the information about what we're going to do for the in-class exercises. So when I say, hey, we're going to start doing in-class exercises in small groups, you want to go in the course portal and be on the session tabs to know what the instructions are. I will explain the instructions beforehand, but this is where you can read about it, and this is where you can access the actual questions we're going to be going over. The assignment tab is really important because this is where you can find the hacker rank link that I talked about earlier. And also below that is all the optional resources that I talked about. So if you want to go through the optional resources before you actually take the hacker rank test, this is where all the information is. And then right there in the very big bold letters is the hacker rank link. So you click on the hacker rank text, and that's how you get to the test to actually start taking it. The resources tab is where we're going to post our lectures. So right now, you might see that everything is just templates and placeholders, but where it says recording and slides, those are going to be live links as soon as the resources are ready. And that's where you can start looking at like how the recorded lectures and the slides that I'm going to post soon. And for all the in-class exercises, we're also going to be publishing solutions for them. So right after an in-class exercise, you might be like, oh, our group didn't quite get to that problem, and we don't know how to do that one. So this is where you can go and look at the solutions for our in-class exercises to get a better idea of what was expected for each problem. All right, so time for questions again. Does anybody have questions about the course portal, what's expected, what's due, what you need to do, what you don't need to do? All right. Great.
Hey, Karen, I'll chime in real quick on some of the questions in the chat. So Karen brought this up, and I just wanted to kind of throw my 2 cents in here too. I think that you asked about dynamic programming, and Alice is asking about the weekly hacker ranks. So I just wanted to give you some context for what Karen and the other instructors have set up for the weeks. So we've run hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of students through this interview process, interview practice, and we've calibrated a lot of things. We found that even though you're familiar, many of you are familiar with a linked list problem, a binary tree question, etc., but the companies were often failing those interviewees. And they were failing them because they had kind of less than rigorous process, which is something that we're going to emphasize a ton in this course. And we got a lot of great outcomes last summer. So Karen's going to unveil that. And 2 was very kind of a boring and sad answer, which was people were just too slow. So like in this thing, which I hate, speed just matters a lot, because for these phone interviews and for these on-sites, you only have about 30 minutes to get the question done. And so if you can get a question done in 45 minutes, you actually just fail, and that's just kind of the reality. And so that's why, we are going to focus a lot on those early topics that you may already be familiar with, because we're going to polish you up, though, to interview speed, which is a much faster speed. And yet simultaneously, you still have to do this rigorous process throughout, which Karen is going to introduce. And so to tie this back to Alice's question, the weekly hacker ranks, they do matter because they're a metric for yourself as to whether you're hitting the speed bar and the completeness bar. And so for the early ones, if you're under the speed, then it's really a signal that you just need to practice more. And then for the later ones, they will start to matter a lot more as we get into the company matching systems, because we want to set you up for success and match you with companies that you're kind of calibrating with. Hopefully I didn't steal the thunder that I know you're gonna unroll. It's probably like the next slide or something, right, Karen?
No. No, that's great. Yeah, hopefully everybody got that. If you still have questions, feel free to ping us on Slack, or if you have concerns about that, let us know. All right, so jumping into in-class exercises. So I kind of talked briefly before about how a big part of this course is going to be our in-class exercises. So how this is going to work is in a moment, I'm going to press a button and you're going to see a thing that says, hey, you've been invited to join this small chat group. So we're going to break out into small groups of 2 to 5. And this will allow us to kind of meet more people inside the class outside of just like this big group environment. And once in your group, what we're going to do is we're going to work on problems together for a topic of the week. So for this week, we're kind of just getting used to how Zoom works, this virtual classroom, and in-class exercise in general. So we're going to take it a little slow for this first week. But the general idea is that for in-class exercises, we're going to actually get our hands dirty with coding or doing thought exercises or practicing certain techniques. So the great thing about this is that a lot of times I've heard that people say sometimes when you're doing phone interviews, it's really awkward, right? Because you either don't see the person on the other side or you're trying to like type while talking at the same time. So this is actually a really great practice for phone interviews in general. Just being comfortable with the dynamic of typing or trying to speak your thought process aloud. So this is going to be our first in-class exercise. So for our first in-class exercise, it's kind of just a warm-up, right? We're just going to get used to how this all works, meeting people virtually. So we're going to practice something really common, which is something that really comes up a lot, just a common interview question that a lot of interviewers start with. Tell me a little bit about yourself, right? So this is almost a loaded question because you can go so many different ways with this. And so we're going to spend this class kind of practicing how to answer this question. And so I want to talk a little bit more of this. So this question is really interesting because you don't want to talk too much about yourself because you want to remember that in an interview, you only have a specific time limit. And the interviewer is always trying to find specific things about you, right? They come into an interview and in their mindset, they already have a checklist. Like, I want to know this, this, this about the interview. So you don't want to spend too much time talking about yourself because they might not even care. So the important thing to think about is you want to be able to give a quick intro, like 2 to 3 minutes, and see where the interviewer wants to go. So the important thing about interviews is you always want to have a back and forth with the interviewer, right? You don't want it to be one-sided where you're talking all the time because that means the interviewer is not going to be able to score you well. So when you say you want to talk a little about yourself, good things to talk about might be stuff like, okay, things you're interested in, why you're interested in working for the company, cool projects you've worked on, something that they can't specifically tell just by reading your resume. So in a moment, we're all going to get separated in small groups. And once you're in your breakout room and once everybody, maybe wait like a minute or two for everybody to come into the room, you want to start by having everybody introduce themselves. You can start with alphabetical order if you don't know how to start specifically. And then you want to take 5 minutes to prep for your answer, right? Because I don't want to put everybody on the spot. So you might, as a group, kind of just think about, okay, if I got asked by my dream company, if I was interviewing for my dream company right now, and the interviewer starts the interview by saying, hey, tell me a little about yourself, what would you say for your first 3 minutes, right? Kind of take 5 minutes to mentally prepare. And then take turns answering the questions. So everybody should take turns answering the question and say, hey, this is a little about me, and jot down notes while everybody else is talking about themselves so that you can give each other feedback later on. And once everybody is done, you kind of want to go around and give everybody feedback. So the important thing to think about here is that when you're listening to someone say, hey, tell me a little about yourself, like what are some things that you wish they didn't talk about? So what are some things that you found interesting? What are some things you didn't find interesting? What are some things that you found confusing and kind of got lost as they were talking? So these are kind of things you want to think about while someone else is talking. Does that kind of make sense for everybody? All right, so I haven't prepared anything, but I was going to do tell me about yourself here. So I'm going to pretend like I'm interviewing for my dream company. So I'm going to make up a dream company. So I'm going to think, so my dream company is going to be working for Nike's self-lacing shoes. Does everybody know what those are? So in my idea, I want to work for this company which makes self-lacing shoes. And these are these really cool shoes that you can put on and you just like press one button or something and then they self-lace. So I go into the interview, Nike's like, this Nike interviewer is like, hey, tell me about yourself. And I'd be like, okay, so here's my little spiel as I go on. So, hey, so I'm Karen. I'm a computer science student at Berkeley right now. And even though I'm really interested in computer science and programming, I'm also really interested in hardware. So outside of my side projects, I've built this really cool self-lacing shoes. So what I did is I created a mobile app because I'm really interested in Android development. And what my mobile app does is I made it communicate with my shoe through Bluetooth to be able to self-lace itself. So through this project, I really was able to learn a lot about Bluetooth and how the technology works. And that's why I'm really interested in working for a company like Nike. So that was like a really bad self-intro because I didn't prepare. So that was something that you don't want to do, right? Kind of just like really blabbering. And that's why I want everybody to spend 5 minutes to think about what you want to actually say. That kind of makes sense? Okay, so anybody have questions before I actually press the magic button to get everybody into breakout rooms? Does everybody know what you're going to do once I say, hey, everybody's going to go into the breakout rooms? Does everybody know where to find information about what you're going to do? Okay, so I'm actually going to ask them. So once you're in your breakout room, what are you going to do? What is everybody going to do? You should type in the chat. Once you're in your breakout room, what's the first thing you're going to do? Introductions. Yes, good. Okay, so this question is, whenever we answer, tell me about yourself. Mention why you want to work. So yeah, I made up a fictional company just on the spot, but in your idea, I'm sure everybody has an idea about what your dream company is, right? You're in school right now, like what is the company you want to work for when you graduate? So imagine yourself in that position where you're actually at that interview. And imagine what you would say if the interviewer from that company asked you, hey, tell me a little about yourself. All right, so so it seems like everybody knows what they're doing. So I'm gonna split everybody up into these rooms now. So in a moment, you're gonna see a pop-up box that says, hey, join this breakout room, and you wanna click that box to join the room. And we're gonna have about 30 minutes for this exercise. So 5 minutes before I'm gonna close all the breakout rooms, I'm gonna send out a message that says, hey, the breakout room is gonna be closed in 5 minutes, and that's when you kinda wanna wrap up. Does that make sense? All right, let's go.